The night I got on my knees in front of a mafia boss was the night my life stopped belonging to me. Rain hammered against the neon-lit windows of the casino, turning the streets of Manhattan into rivers of reflected gold and red. My sneakers squeaked against polished marble as I pushed through crowds of strangers who looked like they belonged in a different world. Men in tailored suits. Women draped in diamonds. People who had never worried about overdue bills or empty refrigerators. My name is Jasmine Brooks, and 20 minutes earlier, I had been sitting in a cramped apartment trying to figure out how to save my little brother. Then my phone rang. One call. One warning. One name. Ethan Nakamura. Everyone in New York seemed to know that name. Some spoke it with admiration. Most spoke it with fear. I didn't care about any of that. All I knew was that my brother was in trouble, and someone told me Ethan Nakamura was the only man who could help. The music stopped the moment I entered the private gaming floor. Maybe it didn't actually stop. Maybe my heart was simply beating too loudly for me to hear anything else. At the far end of the room sat a man surrounded by silence. He wasn't the oldest person there. He wasn't even speaking. Yet every eye in the room drifted toward him as if pulled by gravity. Ethan Nakamura looked completely calm, one hand resting on the arm of his chair, his dark suit perfectly pressed, his expression impossible to read. The people around him stood straight without being told. They watched him the way sailors watch a storm moving across the ocean. Dangerous. Unavoidable. My courage disappeared. My fear didn't. Somehow fear was the thing that kept me moving. Before I realized what I was doing, I crossed the room, dropped to my knees, and looked up at the most powerful man I had ever seen. Conversations faded. Glasses stopped clinking. Every head turned toward me. I swallowed hard and forced the words out. "Please," I whispered. "Save my brother." Ethan studied me without speaking. His eyes moved across my face like he was searching for something hidden beneath the surface. 1 second passed. Then another. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Finally, the corner of his mouth lifted into the faintest smile. Not warm. Not cruel. Just certain. Then he stood, looked directly into my eyes, and said 5 words that changed everything. "I know exactly who you are." The room stayed silent long after Ethan Nakamura spoke. "I know exactly who you are." 5 simple words. Yet they hit harder than anything I had expected. My stomach tightened as I slowly rose from my knees. Every instinct told me to leave, to run back into the rain and pretend none of this had happened. But my brother was still out there somewhere, and fear was a luxury I could not afford. Ethan's pale gray eyes never left mine. He looked completely composed, as if he had all the time in the world. Around him, dozens of people waited without speaking, watching for the smallest signal from the man who seemed to control the entire room with nothing more than his presence. "My brother," I said again, forcing strength into my voice. "Please. I just need to know if he is safe." Ethan glanced toward one of the men standing beside him. The man immediately stepped forward and handed him a tablet. No questions. No hesitation. Ethan studied the screen for several seconds before setting it aside. "Your brother is alive," he said. Relief rushed through me so fast my knees almost gave out again. I grabbed the edge of a nearby chair to steady myself. For the first time in hours I could breathe. "Thank God." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "You love him very much." "He is all I have." The answer escaped before I could stop it. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Not sympathy. Not amusement. Something else. Something deeper. He took a slow step toward me. Expensive watch. Perfect suit. Calm expression. Everything about him radiated control. "You came here alone?" he asked. "Yes." "No lawyer. No police. No friends." I did not have time. His gaze sharpened. "Or maybe you already knew none of them could help." The truth of that stung. I looked away. Ethan was right. Every person I had called earlier had given me the same answer. Stay away. Forget about it. Protect yourself. Nobody wanted to be connected to whatever had happened. Nobody except me. Ethan slipped one hand into his pocket. "You crossed half of Manhattan during a storm and walked into a place most people avoid because you believed I could help. Can you?" I whispered. The room seemed to shrink around us. For a moment it felt like nobody else existed. Just me and the man everyone feared. Ethan studied me carefully before finally nodding once. Yes. Hope surged through my chest. Then he continued. But every favor has a price. The words landed like ice water. I should have expected them. Men like Ethan Nakamura did not build empires through generosity. Nothing in his world came without conditions. I swallowed hard. How much? For the first time, a genuine smile touched his face. Small. Calm. Dangerous. Not money, Jasmine. My heart started racing again. Ethan stepped closer and lowered his voice enough that only I could hear. From tonight forward, you stay where I can protect you. I stared at him, certain I had heard wrong. Protect me from what? His eyes drifted briefly toward the rain-soaked windows overlooking the city. When he looked back, the certainty in his expression sent a chill through me. The people who are looking for your brother are not the reason you are in danger. Then he paused. You are. The drive across the city felt unreal. Rain streaked across the tinted windows of the black sedan, while Manhattan blurred into a river of lights outside. I sat in complete silence, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. Nobody had forced me into the car. That was the part one kept repeating to myself. I could have walked away. I could have disappeared into the storm. But Ethan had said my brother was alive, and right now that was the only thing that mattered. The driver never spoke. Neither did the two security men sitting in the front. The only sound came from the steady rhythm of rain tapping against the glass. 20 minutes later, the car turned into a private underground garage beneath a skyscraper overlooking the Hudson River. I stepped out and stared upward. The building seemed to disappear into the clouds. Everything about it screamed wealth. The kind of wealth that existed so far above my world it barely felt real. A private elevator opened before I could ask a question. One of the guards gestured politely. This way, Miss Brooks. The elevator climbed so smoothly I barely felt it move. When the doors finally opened, I found myself standing inside a penthouse larger than my entire apartment building. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city stretching for miles. Soft lighting reflected across polished wood floors. Fresh flowers sat on marble counters. The air smelled faintly of cedar and expensive coffee. I turned slowly, trying to process everything. This is insane, I whispered. Most people say beautiful. Ethan's voice came from behind me. I spun around. He had entered so quietly I had not heard him. Without his jacket, he somehow looked even more intimidating. Not because of his size. Because of his calm. Nothing seemed capable of surprising him. Nothing seemed capable of shaking him. He walked toward the windows and looked out over the city. You will stay here for now. No. The answer came immediately. Ethan glanced at me. No. I did not agree to this. You agreed when you stepped into my car. Frustration surged through me. You cannot decide where I live. Normally I would agree. His expression remained neutral. These are not normal circumstances. I folded my arms. You still have not explained why I am supposedly in danger. Ethan was silent for several seconds. Then he picked up a tablet resting on the counter and handed it to me. My stomach dropped the moment I saw the screen. A photograph of me leaving my apartment 3 days ago. Another from outside the elementary school where I worked. Another from a grocery store near my neighborhood. The dates were recent. Too recent. My pulse began to race. What is this? I whispered. Surveillance. My mouth went dry. Who is doing this? Ethan's gaze hardened slightly. That is what I am trying to discover. The room suddenly felt colder. Every image showed ordinary moments from my life. Buying groceries, carrying books, walking home from work. Yet seeing them collected together felt terrifying. Someone had been watching me. Someone I never noticed. I looked up at Ethan. Why would anyone care about me? For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. It vanished almost immediately. That, he said quietly, is the question that keeps me awake at night. Sleep should have come easily after everything that happened. Instead, I spent most of the night staring at the ceiling of a guest suite larger than my entire apartment. The city glowed beyond the glass walls, endless light stretching across the darkness like a second sky. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photographs. Someone had been watching me, following me, recording pieces of my ordinary life for reasons nobody could explain. By sunrise, I gave up trying to sleep. I slipped out of bed and quietly explored the penthouse. The place felt less like a home and more like a private world hidden above New York. A library lined with dark wood shelves. A dining room that could seat 20 people. Artwork that probably cost more than every paycheck I had earned in my life. Yet despite the luxury, the space felt strangely empty. Beautiful but lonely. As I wandered down a hallway, I heard voices coming from a partially open door. I stopped. Not because I wanted to eavesdrop. Because I heard Ethan's name. Curiosity won. Usually does. The donations were received yesterday, a man said. 3 hospitals. 2 schools. The youth center in Queens. I frowned. Donations? Another voice answered. The scholarship fund also reached its annual goal. I carefully looked through the opening. Inside was a conference room. Several people sat around a large table reviewing documents. Ethan stood near a screen displaying charts and numbers. Nothing about the meeting resembled what I expected from a man with his reputation. There were no threats. No intimidation. Just discussions about funding programs and community projects. Ethan noticed me standing there. Of course he did. His eyes seemed to catch everything. The conversation stopped immediately. I considered running. Instead, I awkwardly stepped into the room. Sorry, I said. I was looking for coffee. To my surprise, several people smiled. One woman pointed toward the kitchen. You are not the first person to get lost in here. Light laughter filled the room. Ethan remained quiet. After a moment, he nodded toward the hallway. Come with me. I followed him to the kitchen overlooking the river. Morning sunlight reflected off the water. Ethan poured coffee into 2 cups and slid one toward me. You look disappointed. I blinked. What? You expected something else. His expression remained calm. Perhaps a room full of criminals discussing secret plans. Heat rushed to my face. The worst part was that he was right. Ethan took a sip of coffee. People usually believe whatever story is easiest. I studied him carefully. Then tell me the difficult story. For a second, something almost resembling amusement appeared in his eyes. Then it vanished. The difficult story is that people are rarely only one thing. Silence settled between us. I glanced toward the conference room. Those hospitals and schools. You support all of them. Somebody should. The answer was simple. Almost dismissive. Yet something about it felt genuine. The monster I expected to find was becoming harder to locate. That realization unsettled me more than fear ever had. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. The warmth disappeared from his face instantly. His eyes hardened. Without saying a word, he turned the display toward me. On the screen was a photograph taken less than an hour earlier. It showed the front door of my apartment building. And standing outside was someone waiting for me. My eyes locked onto the photograph. The image was clear enough to make my chest tighten. A man stood across the street from my apartment building, hands in his pockets, looking completely ordinary. That was what frightened me most. He did not look dangerous. He looked forgettable. The kind of person you would pass on a sidewalk without noticing twice. Yet someone had considered him important enough to monitor. Who is he? I asked quietly. Ethan set the phone down. We do not know yet. Then how do you know he is connected to me? Ethan looked toward the windows. Because he has been there for 3 hours. A chill ran through me. 3 hours. Long enough to prove this was not coincidence. Long enough to prove someone was waiting. Maybe he is waiting for somebody else. Even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. Ethan remained silent. Sometimes silence was more convincing than any argument. I wrapped both hands around my coffee cup, trying to calm my nerves. You still have not told me what any of this has to do with my brother. Ethan's expression shifted slightly. Not enough for most people to notice. Enough for me. Your brother is part of this, he said carefully. But not in the way you think. My pulse quickened. Then explain it. He studied me for several seconds before walking toward a drawer built into the kitchen island. From inside, he removed a thin folder. The edges were worn, as if it had been opened many times. Ethan placed it in front of me. Read the first page. Confused, I opened it. The document inside contained names, dates, and financial records. Most of it meant nothing to me. Then I saw a familiar name. My brother. Marcus Brooks. I stared at the page. What is this? A transaction record. Marcus does not have money. Exactly. I looked up. Ethan leaned against the counter, arms folded. Your brother never owed me anything. For a moment I thought I had misheard him. What? The debt story was false. The room seemed to tilt. Every decision I had made during the last 24 hours had been based on that belief. Every fear. Every desperate choice. If he did not owe you money, then why was everyone saying he did? Ethan's eyes narrowed. Because someone wanted you to believe it. I sat frozen. The answer created more questions than it solved. Why? I whispered. Why would anyone do that? Ethan's gaze settled on me with an intensity that made my heart pound. Because somebody wanted you to come looking for me. Silence filled the kitchen. Outside, sunlight sparkled across the river. Inside, everything suddenly felt darker. I looked down at the folder again, then back at Ethan. You are saying this was planned? I am saying somebody spent considerable time arranging events that would eventually place you in front of me. My mouth went dry. The memory of that casino floor flashed through my mind. The phone call. The warnings. The panic. The decision to run through the storm. Had none of it been random? Ethan's phone vibrated again. He glanced at the screen. For the first time since I met him, genuine concern appeared in his eyes. What is it? I asked. Ethan slowly lowered the phone. Your brother just tried to contact me directly. Then he paused. And according to the location signal, he is only 4 blocks away. For a second I forgot how to breathe. 4 blocks away. Marcus was only 4 blocks away. Every fear that had haunted me for the last day suddenly collided with a desperate surge of hope. Where is he? I asked. Ethan was already moving. He slipped his phone into his pocket and headed toward the elevator. We are going to find out. I followed him without hesitation. 10 minutes later, I was sitting beside him in the back of another black sedan racing through downtown traffic. The city blurred past the windows. My heart hammered so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Ethan remained calm, studying information on a tablet while speaking quietly into an earpiece. Every few moments another update appeared on the screen. The signal from Marcus's phone continued moving. East, then north, then east again. It was as if he was wandering without a destination. Why would he contact you? I asked. Ethan looked up. That is what concerns me. Maybe he wants help. Maybe. His answer sounded unconvinced. 20 minutes later, the vehicle stopped near a small public park surrounded by office buildings. The rain had finally ended, leaving the sidewalks shining beneath the afternoon sun. People walked dogs. Office workers carried coffee cups. Everything looked completely normal. Ethan's security team spread out quietly. No panic. No urgency. Just efficient movement. One man approached and handed Ethan a phone. Ethan listened for several seconds before ending the call. We found him. Relief exploded through me. I was already reaching for the door handle when Ethan placed a hand on my arm. Not forcefully. Just enough to stop me. Wait. I looked at him. Why? For the first time I noticed tension in his eyes. Because something is wrong. My stomach tightened again. Ethan stepped out first. I followed close behind. We crossed the street and entered the park. Near a fountain stood a familiar figure. Marcus. He looked tired. His clothes were wrinkled. His shoulders slumped with exhaustion. But he was alive. Completely alive. Marcus. I ran toward him. He turned at the sound of my voice. The moment our eyes met, relief flooded his face. He pulled me into a hug so quickly I nearly lost my balance. For several seconds neither of us spoke. I just held on. I thought something happened to you. I whispered. I am okay. His voice sounded shaky. I am sorry, Jasmine. I am so sorry. I pulled back. Sorry for what? Marcus glanced past me. Toward Ethan. The color drained from his face. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Ethan noticed it too. The two men stared at each other across the fountain. Neither spoke. Yet something invisible seemed to pass between them. Something old. Something important. I looked from one to the other. What is going on? Marcus swallowed hard. His eyes filled with guilt. Then he said the last thing I expected to hear. Jasmine. I did not come looking for Ethan. He paused. Ethan was the person I was told to find years ago. The world seemed to freeze around me. The fountain continued splashing. People continued walking through the park. Somewhere nearby, a siren echoed between buildings. Yet all I could focus on were the two men standing across from each other. Marcus looked nervous. Ethan looked something else entirely. Shocked. It was the first time I had seen any emotion break through his carefully controlled exterior. What do you mean years ago? I asked. Marcus rubbed both hands across his face. He suddenly looked younger and older at the same time. Like someone carrying a burden for too long. There are things Mom never told you. My stomach tightened immediately. Anytime a conversation started with those words, it never ended well. Marcus. My voice came out sharper than intended. Tell me what is happening. He glanced at Ethan again before speaking. A few months before she died, Mom gave me a box. I frowned. What box? An old metal lockbox. He swallowed hard. She made me promise not to open it until I turned 21. I stared at him. You never told me this. I know. Guilt flashed across his face. Because I promised her. The pieces still made no sense. Ethan remained completely silent. Watching. Listening. Waiting. Marcus continued. When I finally opened it, there were letters inside. Documents. Photographs. His voice grew quieter. And one name. My pulse quickened. Ethan Nakamura. The city noise seemed to fade away. I slowly turned toward Ethan. His expression had become unreadable again. But I noticed the tension in his jaw. The way his hands remained perfectly still. As if moving might break something fragile. You knew about this? I asked him. Ethan answered honestly. No. Marcus reached into his jacket and removed a worn envelope. The edges were faded with age. He held it carefully like something precious. I have carried this for 5 years. He extended it toward Ethan. Nobody moved for several seconds. Finally, Ethan stepped forward and accepted it. His eyes dropped to the handwriting on the front. Whatever he saw there made the color leave his face. My breath caught. Ethan opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single photograph. He stared at it in complete silence. I could not see the image clearly from where I stood, but I saw the reaction. The way his shoulders stiffened. The way his eyes lingered on the picture as though he were looking into the past itself. Who is it? I asked. Ethan did not answer immediately. When he finally looked up, something had changed. The distance between us felt smaller somehow. More personal. More dangerous. Your mother. My heart stopped. What? Ethan lowered the photograph carefully. This picture was taken 23 years ago. His voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it now. Something emotional. Something human. And the man standing beside her. He paused. His gaze settled directly on me. Was my father. The words hit me harder than anything else had that week. My mother. Ethan's father. For a moment I simply stood there staring at him, convinced I had misunderstood. The park, the fountain, the city around us all seemed to blur into the background. That is impossible, I whispered. Ethan looked down at the photograph again. His expression was distant, as though he were seeing something far beyond the image in his hands. I thought so too. Marcus stepped closer. There is more. He reached into the envelope and removed several folded pages. The paper looked fragile with age. Carefully preserved. Carefully hidden. Ethan accepted them and began reading. The longer he read, the quieter he became. I hated that silence. Every second stretched tighter than the last. Finally, I could not take it anymore. Somebody tell me what is going on. Ethan folded the papers and looked directly at me. 23 years ago, my father disappeared during a trip to New York. I frowned. Disappeared. That is the story everyone was told. His voice remained calm. According to these letters, the truth was different. He handed one page to me. My hands trembled as I read the faded handwriting. The signature at the bottom belonged to my mother. I recognized it immediately. Tears threatened to form before I even finished the first paragraph. She wrote about a man named Kenji Nakamura. About friendship, trust, gratitude. About a night when a terrible accident nearly took his life and someone stepped in to save him. I looked up slowly. Ethan nodded once. Your mother saved my father's life. The words settled over me like sunlight breaking through clouds. Everything suddenly felt connected. The hidden box, the letters, the photograph, even Ethan himself. Why did she never tell us? Marcus asked quietly. Ethan glanced toward the skyline. Because my father asked her not to. Why? Ethan was silent for several moments. Then he gave an answer none of us expected. Because he believed one day his enemies might come looking for anyone connected to him. A cold chill traveled through me. The photographs, the surveillance, the stranger outside my apartment. Suddenly none of it felt random anymore. Ethan continued. Before he left, my father made a promise. His eyes met mine. If anything ever happened to him, his family would protect hers. My breath caught. Protect hers. The words echoed inside my head. Ethan looked down at the letters one final time. For years I thought my father died. Without explaining why he came to America. He paused. Now I know he spent his final days trying to repay a debt. The afternoon sun reflected across the water behind him. For the first time since we met, Ethan did not look like the powerful man everyone feared. He looked like someone carrying the weight of a promise older than both of us. Then his phone vibrated. He checked the screen. Whatever he saw caused every trace of emotion to disappear from his face. We need to leave. My stomach tightened immediately. What happened? Ethan slipped the phone away and looked directly at me. Someone just broke into the storage unit where your mother kept the rest of the records. The storage facility sat on the edge of Brooklyn between an auto repair shop and a row of aging warehouses. By the time we arrived, the sun was beginning to sink behind the skyline. Orange light stretched across the pavement like molten gold. Ethan stepped out first. Marcus followed close behind. I stared at the building and tried to understand how my life had changed so completely in less than 2 days. 24 hours earlier, I had been grading homework assignments at my kitchen table. Now I was standing beside a man whose family history seemed tangled with my own. The facility manager met us at the entrance. He looked nervous. The unit was open this morning, he explained. No signs of forced entry. Ethan exchanged a look with one of his security advisors. So whoever entered had access. The manager swallowed. That is what it looks like. My stomach tightened. We walked through long rows of storage units until we reached a faded blue door marked 214. Marcus stopped beside me. This is the place Mom rented? I nodded slowly. I remember her bringing boxes here when we were kids. Back then I never asked questions. Back then I thought adults always had reasons for everything. Ethan unlocked the door using a key recovered from the envelope. The metal door rolled upward. Dust floated through the air. Old furniture. Cardboard boxes. Family photographs. Decades of memories stacked in silence. Relief washed over me. At first glance everything appeared untouched. Then Ethan moved toward the back wall. Not everything is here. He pointed to an empty space on the floor where a large box had once rested. The outline remained visible in the dust. Someone had removed it recently. Marcus cursed under his breath. What was inside? Ethan looked around carefully. Hopefully something that tells us why it was taken. We spent the next hour searching through every box. Most contained ordinary items. Tax records. Childhood drawings. Old clothes. Then I found a small wooden case hidden beneath a blanket. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside lay a silver pocket watch. Beneath it sat a folded note. Ethan immediately recognized the handwriting. His father's. The air seemed to leave the room. He unfolded the paper carefully and began reading. The message was short. Very short. Yet every word mattered. If you are reading this, then the promise survived. Protect her family. One day they will protect yours. Silence filled the unit. Ethan lowered the letter slowly. For the first time since meeting him, I saw emotion he could not hide. Not power. Not control. Gratitude. His father had trusted my mother. My mother had trusted his father. Somehow that trust had crossed decades to reach us. I stepped closer. You spent years trying to repay a debt that was never yours. Ethan looked at me. The setting sun reflected in his eyes. Some promises are worth keeping. I smiled through tears I could no longer hold back. For the first time, I understood what had truly brought me to that casino. Not fear. Not coincidence. Not fate alone. Promise. One that began long before either of us were born. Ethan glanced at the letter once more before carefully folding it away. Then he looked directly at me and spoke the words that finally made everything clear. The night you came looking for help, Jasmine, you thought you were finding me. He paused. A small smile touched his face. The truth is, I think we were always meant to find each other.